There's a group of Jews who call themselves the Shanghai Jews. Whenever someone interviews them, they often sing a lovely Chinese lullaby with a noticeable Shanghainese accent in their pronunciations.
The trip will start very soon from here in this busy station towards the second biggest city in the People's Republic of China, is Shanghai. And the number of people who is going to take my train is very many. And as always, I find the most cheapest tickets there is. So the train ride from Beijing to Shanghai costs around 300 RMB. That is approximately 30 euro, and it will take altogether 12 hours.
I would like to learn the diversified history of Shanghai Jews, the plight, fear and joy, whilst attempting to survive in this foreign city.
I've been sitting in this train for over 10 hours and it's still going on, so in about an hour I'm about to down. Sounds fantastic right now.
Shanghai's status as the most prominent international trading port in China cemented in the 19th century. During its first golden age, people from all over the globe moved to this town, hoping that they would make a fortune thanks to its lucrative economic policies. After the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, thousands of Ashkenazi Jews moved to this city and established the very first Jewish enclave.
The horror of the war in Europe swept across the entire continent and forced people to flee to save their lives.
The stateless Jewish refugees had nothing when they came here in the wartime, and they were welcomed by a local official. What they had from this city was a very simple, humble place to live and a very small ration of food. Over 20,000 Jewish people from Central Europe came here in the 30s. Many of them enjoyed a relatively peaceful time during the wartime.
The Jewish refugees who sailed away from Genoa to Shanghai with a Japanese asylum visa congregated in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Houngkow district, which belonged to the Japanese concession. In average, every room in the shelter was occupied by up to 10 people. Initially, the Jews suffered from extreme poverty and social isolation due to, among others, the language barriers and the difficult economic recession which was caused by the Sino-Japanese War.
This small living area is not an ordinary place. This was actually once the Jewish refugee shelter, in which thousands and thousands Hungarian and Austrian Jewish people who fled from the wartime and lived here.
Upon the restricted sector, the refugees had to adjust themselves to a number of cumbersome formal restrictions. As the economic situation worsened, while the influx of new Jewish arrivals increased, hunger was widespread.
Some of the Austrian Jews collected their happiest memory from the wartime in this quarter. They didn't have a state which they could call home, and they did not have a common language. What they had is probably a dream to survive a few more years. The Jewish does what they always did in history when they arrived in Shanghai. They work as merchants, they work as doctors, they work as solicitors, and they survived. And they integrate to survive, they integrate to give the children a better future.
Many of the Jews did their best to learn Chinese, participating in various social activities in this bustling cosmopolitan city, since they were not certain whether they would be able to move back to Europe ever again. The The well-connected Jews began to make a good living by trading. Others were heavily involved in establishing Jewish schools and theater clubs to equip the young people with the skill to survive, also a sense of religious faith. Whenever they had an extra penny to spend, some of them would go up to the top floor of the department store building, enjoy the American big band, dance music with their friends. They had also established their own welfare system, helping the most unfortunate ones.
This is a quaint park today, and in the wartime, this is actually the most serene garden where the Jewish people could meet each other to have a small chat about their life in Shanghai, in their old homeland. Regarding the meaning of a old homeland, they were actually stateless refugees, just like many of the refugees today. They had to flee from war, from persecution, and most of all, they want to survive, to have a new chance, to fall in love, to get married, to have children, which will bear their idea of a better tomorrow.
The will to survive is often a very complicated subject, which involves many different ideas in terms of a specific social convention or trends, the power of religious convictions, the mutual encouragements, and a sense of adventure and intriguing discoveries. For the Jews, the Diaspora has always been a part of the religion.
This is a legendary Ashkenazi synagogue here in Shanghai, and today this is mainly a museum. However, you can still see its thermal glory. The Jewish people moved away every time they finally settled down to build this, the most beautiful religious edifice you can imagine. It really feels like it's heaven on earth, to just give them a comfort and a calm, serene moment.
Feeling of finding an inner tranquility must be a luxurious wish for many refugees, who could hardly predict which superpower would use them again as the price target of their upcoming actions, to gain an even greater power upon the world market. This sacred edifice is the Chinese Communist political tool today, to educate their citizens the supremacy of the Chinese culture in comparison with the imperialist countries, incentivizing their young people to doubt whether the limited freedom of speech in China today is a problem, including discussing why this beautiful synagogue is only an exhibition hall.
In the old China, what they met are not only kind-hearted people, also the ancient culture. Between the old Ashkenazi synagogue and this Taoistic temple, it just takes around 5 minutes to walk. And today people are still very pious in this region, although they are dressing modern Adidas brand fashionable clothes.
According to B.F. Skinner, the need to pray, calling upon a divine power in the middle of a difficult time, it's simply a human nature. When the Japanese air raids kept terrorizing everybody from above, the local Chinese residents and the newly migrated stateless Jewish people could only pray in accordance with the ancient ritual, hoping that the heaven above could grant them a moment of peace. The incense witnessed not only their plight, fear and insecurity, most of all their hope for a better tomorrow.
Many Austrian Jews lived here for almost 20 years. They moved away from China first around the 50s and 60s towards Australia and Israel.
The Jewish professionals who made a living by working as the pediatricians, surgeons, pharmacists, electric engineers, and auto mechanics still enjoy a wonderful reputation amongst the old generation in this neighborhood. When talking with the locals, many kept extolling how the destitute Jewish refugees prospered in a difficult time, despite the language barriers and lack of social connections. Many loved to describe how their European neighbors enlightened the relatively isolated, ill-educated many workers by giving them a very different picture of the meaning of life and the idea of progression. Their innocent friendship is not only a sweet memory, which the locals cherish privately, it also legitimates the current communist dictatorship. Huge photos upon an elder Israeli political leader who grew up in Shanghai are the most emblematic decorations in the local neighborhood committee. Moreover, the socialistic Jewish thinkers who lived in Shanghai are celebrated by the local politicians, tricking the Shanghainese to believe that the communist ideologies are loved by the entire planet, especially amongst the oppressed mass who are still suffering harshly in the capitalist country today.